$50 million product launch was 90 minutes away when every light in Sterling Tech went dark. Complete blackout. Emergency power failed. Backup systems dead. In the executive boardroom, 12 Harvard-educated engineers stared at their tablets in horror as error messages flooded their screens. The biggest presentation in company history, with 200 journalists, Department of Energy officials, and investors representing billions in clean energy contracts, was about to become a catastrophic failure. While chaos erupted around the mahogany conference table, Terrell Jackson, the black maintenance worker they'd been dismissing and overlooking for months, quietly walked to the window. He studied the massive generator housing outside, his experienced eyes catching details the panic-stricken engineers missed. The room buzzed with desperate voices. "Call the manufacturer. Get the backup team. We need a miracle." That's when Terrell turned from the window, his calm voice cutting through the hysteria, and said 5 words that would change everything. "I know how to fix this." The boardroom fell silent. 12 Ivy League graduates turned to stare at the man in work boots and a company uniform they'd never bothered to learn the name of. The man they saw as invisible. The man they were about to discover held the key to saving their entire future. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, this story is for you. Hit that like button, because Terrell Jackson is about to show them what real expertise looks like when the stakes couldn't be higher. Sterling Tech's flagship Houston office buzzed with pre-launch energy that Tuesday morning. This wasn't just another product demonstration. This was the moment that would define the company's future in renewable energy. The revolutionary smart grid system they were about to reveal could power entire city blocks using solar panels no larger than a basketball court. The main auditorium overflowed with industry titans. 200 journalists from 30 countries filled the media section. Representatives from the Department of Energy sat in the front row alongside senators who controlled billion-dollar federal contracts. Investment groups worth $60 billion had flown in specifically for this demonstration. Everything depended on perfect synchronization between the building's central generator and the prototype smart grid housed in the demonstration lab. Months of preparation, thousands of man-hours, and the company's entire reputation rode on the next 2 hours. At exactly 11:30 a.m., during the final technical review, disaster struck. The central generator, a 2-year-old Swedish-engineered marvel with triple redundancy systems, died without warning. Not a gradual failure, not a maintenance issue, but catastrophic shutdown that plunged the entire facility into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting harsh shadows across the boardroom where Sterling Tech's senior engineering team scrambled for answers. Chief Engineer Preston Wells, MIT graduate with 15 years of experience, frantically worked his tablet while his team checked diagnostic systems that now showed nothing but error codes. "Generator status, complete failure," announced Rebecca Martinez, the systems specialist. "All backup protocols non-responsive." The room temperature seemed to drop as the reality hit. Without the central generator, there would be no demonstration, no smart grid, no contracts, no future. In the corner of the boardroom, Terrell Jackson stood quietly, observing the chaos with the measured calm of a man who'd seen real crisis before. At 36, he possessed the kind of steady presence that came from handling life-or-death situations where panic meant failure. His broad shoulders filled out the Navy Sterling Tech maintenance uniform, and calloused hands showed 20 years of working with tools and machinery. What the executives couldn't see was the Bronze Star citation in his apartment dresser, or the commendation letters from commanding officers who'd trusted him to keep the lights on in forward operating bases across Afghanistan. 3 years ago, Lieutenant Colonel Terrell Jackson had been designing power grids for military installations, solving complex electrical problems that textbook engineers never encountered. He'd commanded respect, earned substantial pay, and built a career that promised security and advancement. All of that ended when his wife, Keisha, was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The choice was impossible but clear: continue climbing the military ladder while Keisha fought alone, or resign his commission to be the husband and father his family needed. Terrell chose love. He chose to be present for every treatment, every difficult day, every precious moment they had left. After Keisha passed, he chose stability for their 8-year-old daughter Zara. No more deployments, no more months away. Just honest work that let him pick her up from school, help with homework, and tuck her in every night. Zara was brilliant, building robots from recycled electronics, programming basic code, dreaming of attending MIT to study robotics engineering. Every sacrifice Terrell made was for her future, including the private school tuition that consumed most of his maintenance salary and the lingering medical bills that kept him awake at night, calculating payment plans. Across the boardroom, Victoria Sterling gripped the edge of the conference table, her knuckles white with tension. At 29, she commanded Sterling Tech with the kind of fierce determination that came from constantly proving herself in a world that questioned her right to lead. She'd inherited the company at 26 when her father suffered a massive heart attack during a board meeting. One day, she was Victoria Sterling, recent MBA graduate working in the marketing department. The next, she was CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation with shareholders demanding results and competitors waiting for her to fail. The business press called her ambitious. Her board called her difficult. She called herself necessary. Every decision was calculated to project strength, every interaction designed to establish dominance. She'd learned that in a male-dominated industry, any sign of uncertainty was blood in the water. The pressure was relentless. Company stock had dropped 12% in the past quarter. The board scheduled monthly reviews that felt more like interrogations. Industry analysts questioned whether someone her age, regardless of her Harvard MBA, could handle the complexities of renewable energy innovation. This product launch represented everything. Success meant validation, respect, and the kind of revolutionary breakthrough that would silence every critic. Failure meant proving that perhaps her critics were right, that she wasn't ready for the responsibility she'd inherited. Preston Wells looked up from his tablet, his face grim. Minimum 6 hours to diagnose the problem properly. Maybe 8 hours to implement repairs, assuming we can identify the issue. Victoria felt the world tilt. 8 hours meant missing every deadline. The journalists would leave. The investors would withdraw their commitments. The senators would remember this embarrassment when federal contracts were awarded. Her father's company, now her company, would become a cautionary tale about nepotism and unqualified leadership. "We're finished," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "This will destroy everything." The engineering team huddled around diagnostic equipment, their voices growing increasingly desperate. Nobody wanted to be the bearer of worse news, but the situation was clear. They were facing a complete system failure with no quick solutions. That's when Terrell stepped forward, his work boots silent on the polished floor. "Actually, ma'am, I think I can fix this." The room went dead silent. 12 executives and engineers turned to stare at the black maintenance worker who just claimed he could solve what they couldn't. The man they passed in hallways without acknowledgement. The man whose name they'd never learned despite seeing him nearly every day for 3 months. Victoria's first instinct was disbelief. Her second was anger. How dare someone, anyone, suggest that her entire engineering team, with their advanced degrees and years of experience, had missed something obvious? But as she looked at Terrell's face, she saw something that made her pause. No arrogance, no grandstanding, just quiet confidence and the kind of steady certainty that came from genuine expertise. The moments stretched between them, heavy with possibility and risk, while the clock on the wall ticked toward disaster, or salvation. Victoria Sterling stared at Terrell Jackson for a long moment, her mind racing between desperation and disbelief. Around the boardroom, the engineering team shifted uncomfortably, tablet screens still displaying the catastrophic failure that threatened to end careers and destroy reputations. She'd built her leadership on never showing weakness, never backing down from a challenge, and never letting anyone, especially subordinates, question her authority. But here stood a maintenance worker, claiming he could accomplish what her entire team of MIT and Stanford graduates couldn't. The absurdity of it triggered something dangerous in Victoria, the same ruthless instinct that had helped her survive 3 years as the youngest CEO in the industry. She would crush this presumption publicly, decisively, and memorably. You think you can fix what my entire engineering team can't? Her voice carried the icy precision she used to intimidate competitors during hostile negotiations. Fine. Fix that generator in 90 minutes and I'll kiss you right here in front of everyone. The words hung in the air like poison. Every person in the room understood the implications: the sexual power play, the humiliation tactic, the calculated cruelty of a CEO weaponizing her position. But when you fail, and you will fail, you're fired. No severance, no references, nothing. Victoria smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd just played a winning hand. She'd transformed a moment of corporate crisis into a demonstration of her absolute power. The maintenance worker would back down, apologize for overstepping, and everyone would remember who truly commanded this room. The boardroom atmosphere shifted instantly. What had been professional panic became something far more uncomfortable. A racial and sexual power dynamic playing out in front of witnesses who suddenly wished they were anywhere else. Preston Wells, the chief engineer, leaned toward his colleague and whispered just loud enough for others to hear. "Who does he think he is? This is beyond embarrassing." The comment sparked a ripple of murmured conversations. A maintenance worker challenging our entire team? The audacity is unbelievable. Someone needs to put him in his place. But underneath the professional outrage lay something more troubling. The historical weight of a black man being publicly challenged and humiliated by a white woman in power. The dynamic carried echoes of centuries of systemic oppression, of black competence being dismissed, of dangerous territory where speaking up could cost everything. Near the back of the room, Keisha Williams, a young black engineer who joined Sterling Tech 6 months earlier, felt her stomach clench with recognition. She'd watched Terrell work for weeks, noticed his careful precision, his quiet competence, the way he solved problems others missed. Unlike her colleagues, she'd actually listened when he'd mentioned his military background during lunch conversations. Keisha saw what others missed, or chose not to see. This wasn't arrogance from a maintenance worker. This was expertise being dismissed because of assumptions about who deserved to have knowledge. But she also understood the impossible position Victoria had created. In challenging Terrell so publicly, so sexually, so aggressively, the CEO had turned a potential solution into a power struggle that could destroy them all. For Terrell, the moment crystallized everything he'd experienced since taking this job. The way conversations stopped when he entered rooms. The assumption that maintenance meant mindless. The reality that his military record, his engineering background, his actual qualifications meant nothing compared to the uniform he wore and the color of his skin. Victoria's challenge wasn't just about fixing a generator. It was about knowing his place, accepting his role, and never again presuming to possess knowledge that threatened the established order. Terrell's mind raced back 18 months to a sterile hospital room where Keisha lay dying, her once strong hand weak in his. "Promise me something, baby," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible over the machines keeping her alive. "Promise me you'll give Zara every opportunity I can't. Promise me you'll never let her settle for less than she deserves." He'd made that promise through tears, holding her hand as she slipped away. Everything since, the career change, the financial sacrifice, the swallowed pride, had been about keeping that promise. This job at Sterling Tech paid for Zara's enrollment at Houston Academy of Sciences, a private school with advanced STEM programs that nurtured her robotics obsession. The tuition consumed 60% of his maintenance salary, but watching Zara's eyes light up when she talked about building assistive robots made every sacrifice worthwhile. If he lost this job, Zara would return to the underfunded public school where budget cuts had eliminated the robotics program entirely. She'd lose access to the advanced mathematics courses, the coding workshops, the mentorship that was preparing her for the MIT dreams they shared. But if he stayed silent, accepted Victoria's disrespect, what lesson was he teaching his daughter about standing up for herself, about the value of her own knowledge and capabilities? The weight of single parenthood pressed down on him, the responsibility of being both provider and role model, of showing Zara how to navigate a world that would constantly underestimate her potential. In his mind, he heard Zara's voice from just last week. "Daddy, why do some people think girls can't be engineers?" He'd told her that some people were wrong, that her dreams were just as valid as anyone else's, that she should never let others define her limits. Now he faced his own test. Would he model the courage he'd been teaching her, or would he show her that sometimes survival meant accepting disrespect? Preston Wells stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. This is absolutely ridiculous. A janitor thinks he knows more than MIT graduates? This isn't just embarrassing. It's insulting to our entire profession. His words triggered a cascade of support from colleagues who'd spent years earning their credentials, who couldn't accept that someone they'd dismissed as just maintenance might possess knowledge they lacked. The generator is Swedish engineered with proprietary systems, added Rebecca Martinez. Even if he has some basic electrical knowledge, this requires advanced diagnostics. We're talking about millions of dollars in equipment, another engineer chimed in. One wrong move could cause permanent damage. The chorus of professional dismissal grew louder, but Terrell noticed what others missed, the discomfort in some faces. Not everyone in the room was comfortable with Victoria's sexual power play or the racial undertones of the confrontation. Keisha Williams caught his eye briefly, a moment of recognition and support that reminded him he wasn't completely alone, but she was too junior to speak up, too new to risk her own position by defending someone others saw as beneath professional consideration. The senior staff watched with the fascination of spectators at a gladiator match. Careers were on the line, not just Terrell's, but Victoria's leadership credibility and the engineering team's professional reputation. Whatever happened next would be remembered, discussed, and used to judge everyone present. Victoria stood at the center of it all, committed to a course of action that was already spiraling beyond her control. Too proud to back down, too invested in her power display to recognize the dangerous territory she'd entered. The room fell silent as Terrell stepped forward, his work boots quiet on the polished floor. When he spoke, his voice carried the steady authority of a man who'd commanded respect in life-or-death situations, who'd learned to project calm in the face of chaos. Ma'am, I don't want your kiss. I don't need your validation, but my daughter deserves to see her father stand up when he knows he's right. I'll fix your generator because it's broken, and I know how to fix it. That's all. The simplicity of his response was devastating. No anger, no defensiveness, no acknowledgement of the sexual humiliation Victoria had attempted. Just dignity, purpose, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of. Preston Wells laughed, actually laughed at the audacity. This is insane. You're seriously going to let maintenance waste precious time on some fantasy repair job? But Victoria found herself studying Terrell's face, seeing something she hadn't expected. This wasn't bravado or desperation. This was the calm certainty of genuine expertise, the kind of quiet confidence that couldn't be faked. For the first time since issuing her challenge, doubt crept into her mind. What if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her career? What if the black maintenance worker she'd been dismissing for months actually possessed the knowledge to save them all? And what if her attempt to humiliate him had revealed more about her own prejudices than his limitations? Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever had to choose between staying quiet and standing up for what you know is right. Terrell walked through the facility's lower level, his footsteps echoing off concrete walls as he approached the generator housing. Behind him, the heated voices from the boardroom faded into distant murmurs. Ahead lay the massive machine that held everyone's future in its silent metal core. The generator room hit him like a furnace blast, already climbing toward 100 degrees Fahrenheit from residual heat and poor ventilation. The Swedish-engineered beast dominated the space, a $12 million monument to precision technology that had somehow failed at the worst possible moment. Terrell circled the machine slowly, his trained eyes cataloging details the panicked engineers had missed. While they'd focused on digital diagnostics and error codes, he was reading the physical story the generator itself was telling. The exhaust venting showed a particular pattern, irregular heat distribution that suggested internal pressure problems. The main control panel displayed error codes that looked electrical, but Terrell recognized the cascade pattern from bitter experience. His mind flashed back to Afghanistan. Summer of 2019. Forward Operating Base Kandahar, middle of a sandstorm that had lasted 3 days. Their primary generator, coincidentally, the same Swedish manufacturer, had failed during a mortar attack, leaving the medical facility in darkness with wounded soldiers depending on life support. The diagnostic systems had shown identical error codes, the same cascade of electrical failures that had fooled the field technicians. But Terrell had seen this exact failure pattern before, knew that what looked like complex electrical malfunction was actually mechanical. A pressure relief valve failure that triggered protective shutdowns throughout the entire system. In Afghanistan, he'd fixed it using salvage parts and field engineering techniques no textbook had ever taught. The medical facility had come back online just as the medevac helicopters arrived, with casualties who needed immediate surgery. Now, facing the same problem in a corporate setting instead of a combat zone, Terrell knew exactly what needed to be done. The solution required bypassing multiple safety systems, creating temporary circuits using components never intended to work together, and trusting field experience over manufacturer protocols. It was dangerous, unconventional, and completely outside normal procedures. It was also the only way to get the generator running in 90 minutes. Terrell stripped off his outer work shirt, revealing a white t-shirt underneath that soon darkened with sweat. The generator room temperature climbed steadily as he worked, but he'd endured worse conditions in desert bases where 120-degree heat was routine. His calloused hands moved with practiced precision. 20 years of real-world engineering compressed into muscle memory. He opened service panels that revealed the generator's internal complexity. Thousands of connections, hundreds of circuits, all designed by people who'd never had to fix anything under actual pressure. The smell of hot metal and electrical burn filled his nostrils as he traced wiring paths with his fingertips, feeling for problems that wouldn't show up on any diagnostic screen. His toolkit contained instruments he'd carried through 3 combat deployments, wire strippers worn smooth by constant use, multimeters that had diagnosed problems in places where failure meant death. Security cameras tracked his every movement, broadcasting live feeds to the boardroom where executives watched with growing fascination. What they were witnessing didn't match their assumptions about maintenance work or their understanding of the man they'd dismissed. Terrell began creating connections that existed in no manual, bypassing the failed pressure relief system by routing power through emergency backup capacitors. The work required intimate knowledge of electrical engineering principles combined with practical experience that only came from years of making broken things work again. Sweat dripped onto the concrete floor as he worked deeper into the generator's core systems. Each connection had to be perfect. One mistake could damage components worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or create safety hazards that could endanger the entire building. But his hands remained steady, guided by expertise earned in places where second chances didn't exist. The executive conference room had transformed into a mission control center, with all eyes focused on the security monitors displaying multiple angles of Terrell's work. What had begun as skeptical observation gradually shifted to confused fascination. "What exactly is he doing?" Rebecca Martinez asked, studying the live feed intently. "Those connections? They're not standard protocol." Preston Wells leaned forward, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by technical curiosity. "He's routing power through the emergency capacitor bank, but that's not how you're supposed to restore main generator function." Keisha Williams, the young engineer who'd been watching quietly, suddenly straightened. "Wait, he's not trying to fix the original failure. He's creating a parallel circuit using the emergency backup capacitors as primary power sources." The room went quiet as the implications sank in. "That's not random modification," Keisha continued, her voice carrying growing excitement. "He's essentially building a secondary generator within the existing generator housing. But that level of electrical engineering knowledge, how does a maintenance worker understand advanced power grid design?" Preston's confusion was evident. Even if he has some electrical background, what he's attempting requires expertise in military-grade power systems. That's specialized knowledge that takes years to develop. Victoria Sterling stood at the window, watching Terrell work with growing unease. Nothing about this situation matched her assumptions. The man she'd publicly humiliated as just maintenance was demonstrating technical competence that exceeded her own engineering team's capabilities. "Someone pull his personnel file," she commanded quietly. Her assistant quickly accessed the company database, but the standard employment record showed only basic information. Terrell Jackson, maintenance technician, 3 months employment, previous position listed as military service. "Get me his full background," Victoria insisted. "Military records, education, everything." The deeper search took longer, requiring security clearances and database access that revealed what Sterling Tech's Human Resources Department had never bothered to investigate. The comprehensive military file that appeared on Victoria's tablet painted a completely different picture of the man currently working to save their company. Lieutenant Colonel Terrell Jackson, Army Corps of Engineers. 22 years active duty, Bronze Star for Valor, Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. Multiple commendations for exceptional service under fire. His specialty, designing and maintaining power grid systems for forward operating bases in hostile environments. His expertise, field engineering solutions for critical infrastructure under combat conditions. The records showed a distinguished career trajectory, rapid promotions, command of increasingly complex projects, responsibility for power systems that kept entire military bases operational in Afghanistan and Iraq. His final assignment had been Senior Advisor for Electrical Infrastructure Development, a position that required extensive knowledge of both theoretical engineering and practical field application. His resignation from the military had been voluntary, submitted immediately after requesting emergency family leave for his wife's cancer treatment. The file contained glowing recommendations from commanding officers who tried unsuccessfully to convince him to reconsider. Distinguished service record. Irreplaceable expertise in combat power systems management. Strong recommendation for civilian engineering positions requiring advanced technical knowledge and leadership under pressure. Victoria stared at the screen, the reality of her mistake becoming devastatingly clear. The man she'd dismissed as incompetent maintenance staff was actually a decorated military engineer with more real-world experience than her entire team combined. He hadn't taken the maintenance position because it was his skill level. He'd taken it because it offered the schedule flexibility and job security needed to care for his dying wife and raise his daughter alone. The maintenance worker she'd publicly humiliated was actually more qualified than the CEO who'd challenged him. At 1:47 p.m., with 13 minutes remaining until Victoria's deadline, Terrell made the final connection in his improvised circuit. The generator housing fell completely silent, except for the distant hum of air conditioning and the sound of his own breathing. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Terrell placed one hand on the generator housing, feeling for vibrations that would indicate internal activity. The metal remained still, lifeless, offering no hint that his unconventional solution was working. In the boardroom, executives held their breath. Had the maintenance workers' confidence been misplaced? Had Victoria's public challenge exposed a moment of dangerous overreach that would cost them everything? Then, deep within the generator's core, something stirred. A vibration, almost below the threshold of hearing. Terrell felt it through his palm against the housing. The first tremor of a massive machine remembering how to live. The vibration grew stronger, steadier, building into a rhythm that resonated through the concrete floor. Auxiliary systems began responding to the restored power flow, indicator lights blinking to life across control panels that had been dark for hours. At exactly 1:48 p.m., the generator roared back to life, not with its normal smooth operation, but with the determined growl of machinery forced back from failure through sheer expertise and will. Every light in Sterling Tech flooded back on simultaneously. Computer systems blinked awake. The demonstration grid in the main auditorium hummed with restored power, ready for the presentation that would determine everyone's future. Terrell emerged from the generator room exhausted, his white shirt soaked with sweat and stained with grease. His hands were black with oil, and his face showed the strain of 90 minutes spent wrestling a $12 million machine back to life. but his shoulders remained straight, his expression calm. He'd done what he'd promised to do, not for Victoria's validation or the engineering team's respect, but because he'd known it was possible, and they'd needed it done. Victoria stared at the man she'd so thoroughly underestimated, finally understanding who Terrell Jackson really was, and realizing how completely she'd revealed who she was in return. The boardroom erupted in applause, tentative at first, then building to genuine appreciation as the full magnitude of what had just happened sank in. Lights blazed throughout the building, computers hummed back to life, and the demonstration grid powered up with perfect stability. Preston Wells clapped slowly, his earlier skepticism replaced by professional admiration mixed with embarrassment. That was actually brilliant engineering, completely unconventional, but brilliant. Rebecca Martinez nodded, studying the readouts on her tablet. The power output is stable, all systems green. However he did it, it's working perfectly. But not everyone in the room shared their enthusiasm. Some executives clapped grudgingly, their applause tainted by the uncomfortable realization that they just witnessed their fundamental assumptions about competence, authority, and worth proven catastrophically wrong. Victoria Sterling stood frozen at the window, her hands still gripping the conference table. The military file glowed on her tablet screen. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Lieutenant Colonel, Distinguished Service Record. Each line a hammer blow to her confidence. She'd built her leadership on the belief that she could read people, assess situations, make hard decisions under pressure. Yet she'd completely misjudged the man who'd just saved her company, her reputation, and possibly her career. The product launch proceeded flawlessly. Investors marveled at the smart grid demonstration, journalists captured footage of revolutionary technology in action, and Department of Energy officials discussed billion-dollar federal contracts. By 4:30 p.m., Sterling Tech had secured $50 million in new commitments. Victoria moved through the celebration in a daze, accepting congratulations and fielding questions while her mind remained fixed on a single thought. The man who'd made it all possible had quietly clocked out at 2 p.m. and disappeared. While she'd been networking with investors and posing for photographs, Terrell Jackson had cleaned his tools, completed his time card, and left to pick up his daughter from school. No fanfare, no recognition seeking, no attempt to capitalize on his moment of triumph. Just a man keeping his promise to be home in time for what mattered most. Victoria found Terrell in the parking garage at 6:15 p.m., loading his tools into the bed of his weathered Ford pickup. The truck was at least 15 years old, its blue paint faded and touched up in places, but maintained with the same careful precision he'd shown with the generator. He'd changed out of his work uniform into jeans and a clean flannel shirt, transforming from maintenance worker into simply a father heading home to his daughter. The contrast highlighted how completely Victoria had failed to see him as a complete person with a life beyond his job function. "You left," she called out, her heels clicking against concrete as she approached. "The launch isn't over. There are investors who want to meet you, journalists asking about the technical solution. People want to know who you are." Terrell continued securing his toolbox, not looking up. "Ma'am, I fixed generators. That generator's fixed. My shift ended at 2, and my daughter has a robotics demonstration tonight at her school. She's been working on it for 3 months." The simple statement contained layers of priority that Victoria had never considered. While she'd been basking in corporate success, celebrating with investors who might never remember her name, Terrell had been focused on a promise to an 8-year-old girl who'd been counting on her father's presence. "But this could be huge for your career," Victoria pressed. "The recognition, the opportunities." Terrell finally looked at her, his expression patient but firm. "Miss Sterling, I had a career. I had recognition and opportunities and all the success metrics your world values. I gave them up for something better." Victoria shifted uncomfortably, the weight of her earlier behavior pressing down like physical discomfort. "About what I said earlier, the kiss thing. That was inappropriate." Terrell's response was measured, without anger, but carrying undeniable truth. "It was disrespectful. You used your position to humiliate me because you thought I was beneath you. But here's what you didn't understand. I wasn't trying to prove anything to you. I was showing my daughter that when you see something broken, you fix it. The words hit Victoria harder than any boardroom confrontation she'd ever faced. She'd reduced a moment of genuine expertise to a power game, transformed professional competence into personal humiliation, all because she couldn't accept that someone she'd dismissed might possess knowledge she lacked. I was scared, she admitted, the confession surprising them both. The board has been questioning my leadership, the stock price is dropping, and I felt like I was failing at everything my father built. When you stepped forward, I felt threatened. Terrell studied her face, seeing something different from the cold executive who'd challenged him hours earlier. Fear doesn't excuse disrespect, ma'am, but at least now you're being honest about it. I've been fighting to prove myself since inheriting this company, Victoria continued, her voice losing its corporate polish. Every decision gets scrutinized. Every mistake becomes evidence that I'm not qualified. I thought I had to project strength constantly, never show uncertainty. Terrell leaned against his truck, considering her words. Respect isn't something you take, Miss Sterling. It's something you earn, and you don't earn it by making others feel small. You earn it by lifting them up, by recognizing their value, by treating people like they matter. But this is a competitive industry, Victoria protested. If I show any weakness, there's a difference between strength and cruelty, Terrell interrupted gently. Real strength doesn't require breaking others down. It builds them up. The parking garage fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic. Victoria found herself in unfamiliar territory, receiving wisdom from someone she'd been taught to consider beneath her notice. You and I live in different worlds, Miss Sterling, Terrell continued. I've learned to navigate yours when I have to, but you've never had to understand mine. You've never had to prove your worth to people who've already decided you don't belong. You've never had to choose between pride and providing for your family. His words carried the weight of lived experience, of navigating professional environments where competence was questioned based on appearance, where respect had to be earned again and again, despite proven capabilities. Victoria looked down at her hands, manicured and soft, so different from Terrell's calloused fingers that had just saved her company. I never asked your name before today. You never needed to, Terrell replied without bitterness. I was just maintenance to you, just another piece of equipment to be used when necessary. Terrell Jackson, Victoria said slowly, reading from the military file still open on her phone. Lieutenant Colonel, retired, Army Corps of Engineers, Bronze Star recipient, Purple Heart. Father. She looked up at him. I should have known your name. I should have known who you are. Knowing my name wouldn't have changed anything if you didn't see me as worth knowing, Terrell said. The problem wasn't information, Miss Sterling. The problem was assumptions. The truth of his statement settled between them like a bridge, not crossing the divide between their worlds, but acknowledging its existence. Victoria noticed a mud splash on the side of Terrell's truck, probably from the morning's rain. Without thinking, she moved toward it. Let me clean that off for you. Terrell caught her arm gently, stopping her. Ma'am, you don't need to do that. But I want to, she insisted. After what you did today, after how I treated you. Cleaning my truck won't fix what happened between us, Terrell said, not unkindly. And I don't need you to prove you've learned something by reversing roles. I just need you to remember that every person who works for you has value, has knowledge, has dignity that deserves respect. Victoria nodded, understanding that her gesture, while well-intentioned, missed the deeper point. It wasn't about role reversal or dramatic gestures. It was about fundamental human recognition. Terrell climbed into his truck, then rolled down the window. Maybe the next time you need something fixed, you'll remember that respect doesn't cost extra. And maybe you'll ask people's names before you decide what they're worth. As he drove away, Victoria stood alone in the parking garage, surrounded by luxury cars and executive privileges, finally understanding that true leadership had nothing to do with power over others and everything to do with power shared with others. Comment below. Have you ever had someone completely underestimate your abilities based on how you looked or what job you had? The following morning, Victoria arrived at Sterling Tech before dawn, unable to sleep after her parking garage encounter with Terrell. She found herself in the security office, reviewing footage from the past 3 months, not investigating problems, but trying to understand the man she'd so completely misjudged. The recordings revealed a pattern of quiet decency she'd never noticed. There was Terrell sharing his lunch with Marcus Williams, a homeless veteran who gathered recyclables near the parking garage entrance. Not just handing over food, but sitting with the man for 20 minutes, listening to stories about Vietnam service and offering practical advice about accessing veterans' benefits. Another clip showed him in the maintenance break room after hours, helping the night custodian's teenage son with algebra homework. Terrell's patience was remarkable, explaining complex mathematical concepts using simple analogies until the boy's confusion cleared into understanding. Most revealing was footage from just last week. Terrell staying late to repair a malfunctioning elevator that wasn't officially his responsibility, simply because he'd overheard 2 elderly visitors mention their difficulty with stairs. No work order, no overtime compensation, just competence applied to help others. Victoria's assistant brought her Terrell's complete employee records, not just the basic information HR had collected, but the full background check that revealed the scope of his sacrifices. Keisha Jackson had died without life insurance, leaving behind medical bills that totaled more than Terrell's annual maintenance salary. His current financial situation showed someone living paycheck to paycheck, choosing his daughter's education over his own comfort. The maintenance worker she'd dismissed possessed a master's degree in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech, earned through military education benefits. His academic achievements exceeded those of several senior executives, yet he'd chosen a position that utilized only a fraction of his capabilities because it offered the schedule flexibility single fatherhood demanded. Victoria closed the files feeling hollowed out by shame. She'd built her leadership on the assumption that she could assess people quickly and accurately. Yet she'd spent 3 months working alongside someone whose character, intelligence, and expertise surpassed her own, without ever bothering to learn who he really was. The all-hands meeting Victoria called that Friday shocked employees with its unprecedented honesty. Standing before 300 staff members, she abandoned her prepared remarks and spoke from the heart. This week, I learned something that should embarrass me professionally and personally. We have been operating under assumptions about people's worth based on their job titles rather than their actual capabilities and character. That changes now. She instituted skills and background sharing sessions where employees could voluntarily discuss their experiences, education, and expertise beyond their current roles. The revelations were stunning. The night security guard was a former police detective with cybersecurity expertise. The cafeteria manager held an MBA and had run restaurants in 3 countries before immigrating to America. A janitor possessed extensive knowledge of industrial chemistry from his previous career in pharmaceutical manufacturing. Most significantly, Victoria discovered 3 other military professionals working in positions that vastly underutilized their experience. James Rodriguez, a facilities coordinator, had been a Navy nuclear engineer. Patricia Thompson, a file clerk, was a former Air Force logistics officer. David Kim, a groundskeeper, had commanded Army supply operations across multiple continents. Victoria created cross-department mentorship programs pairing these experienced professionals with newer engineers. The results were immediate. Problem-solving approaches improved, efficiency increased, and workplace morale shifted as people felt genuinely valued for their complete selves rather than narrow job functions. Terrell watched Victoria's transformation with cautious optimism mixed with healthy skepticism. Corporate culture changes often proved superficial, public relations gestures designed to project progressive values without addressing fundamental power dynamics. But Victoria's efforts felt different. She attended the skills-sharing sessions not as an executive observing from above, but as a participant, learning alongside everyone else. She asked questions that demonstrated genuine curiosity rather than performative interest. Most importantly, she made concrete policy changes that gave employees pathways to contribute beyond their official job descriptions. Still, Terrell maintained focus on what mattered most, providing for Zara and modeling integrity regardless of external recognition. He continued tutoring colleagues' children, supporting the homeless veteran in the parking garage, and approaching his maintenance work with the same precision he'd once applied to military engineering projects. His growing friendship with Keisha Williams, the young engineer who'd recognized his competence during the generator crisis, provided valuable perspective. She helped him navigate the company's evolving culture while keeping him grounded in reality. "Change is good," Keisha told him during a lunch conversation. "But change that lasts comes slowly. Don't let yourself get comfortable until you're sure it's real." Terrell appreciated her wisdom. He'd seen too many organizations promise transformation only to revert to familiar patterns once public attention moved elsewhere. Time would reveal whether Victoria's awakening represented genuine growth or temporary guilt. 3 weeks later, Zara Jackson stood in the Houston Convention Center, surrounded by the most advanced student robotics projects in Texas. The annual STEM Championship drew middle school participants from across the state, each presenting innovations that would make professional engineers proud. Zara's entry was personally meaningful. An assistive robot designed to help disabled students navigate school environments independently. She'd programmed it to recognize obstacles, identify accessible routes, and provide audio guidance for students with visual impairments. The project had consumed her evenings for months, funded by Terrell's extra shifts and weekend work. He'd watched her struggle with coding challenges, celebrate small breakthroughs, and persist through frustrations that would discourage many adults. Now, wearing her best dress and clutching note cards with technical specifications, she prepared to present her creation to judges who included university professors and technology industry professionals. Terrell arrived directly from his morning shift, still wearing his work uniform, but carrying the pride of a father who'd moved mountains to support his daughter's dreams. He found seats in the family section, ready to cheer regardless of competition results. That's when he saw Victoria Sterling enter the convention center. She wore casual clothes, jeans, and a simple blouse instead of her usual business attire, and carried a small poster board with "Go Zara" written in colorful letters. Her presence wasn't announced or publicized. She'd simply come to support the daughter of someone she was learning to respect. During the judges' deliberation, Victoria approached Terrell in the family waiting area. The conversation that followed marked a turning point in their relationship. "She's brilliant," Victoria said, watching Zara demonstrate her robot to fascinated spectators, just like her father. "She gets her brains from her mother," Terrell replied, his voice carrying the weight of loss and pride. "Keisha was a computer programmer before she got sick. She would have understood this project better than I do." Victoria felt the familiar sting of assumptions proven wrong. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "There's a lot you don't know about the people who work for you," Terrell said gently. "But you're learning." The simple statement acknowledged both the distance Victoria still needed to travel and the genuine progress she'd already made. It was encouragement and challenge combined, recognition that growth was possible but not yet complete. They watched Zara interact with other competitors, sharing technical knowledge and celebrating each other's innovations with the generous spirit children possessed before learning artificial limitations. "She doesn't see barriers the way adults do," Victoria observed. "Not yet," Terrell agreed. "But she will, because the world will teach them to her. My job is to make sure she learns to overcome them instead of accept them." When the judges announced results, Zara Jackson's assistive navigation robot earned first place in the innovation category. She approached the microphone with 8-year-old confidence, delivering an acceptance speech that brought tears to adult eyes. "My daddy taught me that being underestimated is just another challenge to overcome," she said, her clear voice carrying across the convention center. "When people think you can't do something because of how you look or where you come from, you just have to work harder to show them who you really are." Terrell felt his composure crack as his daughter's words reflected lessons she'd absorbed by watching his daily example. She'd been learning from his strength, his dignity, his refusal to let others define his worth. Without realizing it, he'd been teaching her the most important curriculum of all: how to maintain self-respect in a world that might not always offer it freely. Victoria watched this father-daughter moment with growing understanding of what her earlier behavior had truly cost. She hadn't just disrespected an employee, she'd risked teaching a brilliant child that her father's expertise and character didn't matter if he worked in the wrong uniform. The competition victory was wonderful, but the real triumph was watching Zara Jackson beam with pride, not just for her robot, but for the father who'd sacrificed everything to help her reach this moment. As families celebrated around them, Victoria finally grasped the full magnitude of leadership responsibility, not just managing corporate success, but recognizing that every decision affected real people with real dreams that deserved respect and support. 6 months after the generator crisis that changed everything, Sterling Tech had become an entirely different company. The transformation wasn't just visible in policy changes or organizational charts. It radiated through every interaction, every decision, every moment where leadership had the choice between ego and effectiveness. Terrell Jackson now carried the title Senior Facilities Engineer, a position created specifically to utilize his expertise while respecting his commitment to work-life balance. The role wasn't charity or guilt-driven promotion. It was recognition that his military engineering background and field experience made him invaluable for critical infrastructure decisions. His new office sat adjacent to the main engineering department, but Terrell still spent most days moving throughout the facility, maintaining his hands-on approach while consulting on complex technical projects. The younger engineers sought his guidance regularly, drawn to his practical wisdom and patient teaching style. Victoria's skills-based leadership program had revolutionized company culture. Rather than hiring solely based on traditional credentials, Sterling Tech now assessed candidates' full range of capabilities, life experiences, and problem-solving approaches. The diversity of backgrounds strengthened every department, bringing fresh perspectives to challenges that had previously stumped homogeneous teams. The industry noticed. Sterling Tech received the National Workplace Equality Initiative Award, recognizing companies that demonstrated measurable progress in inclusive leadership practices. More importantly, their stock price reached all-time highs as innovative solutions emerged from teams that truly represented different ways of thinking. Business publications wrote case studies about the Sterling model, how recognizing hidden talent within existing workforce had generated both cultural improvement and financial success. Victoria gave interviews about transformative leadership, always crediting the employees who taught her to see beyond surface assumptions. Victoria Sterling no longer entered rooms like a conquering general, ready to dominate through intimidation and power displays. Her leadership style had evolved into something more sophisticated, the confidence that came from lifting others up rather than pushing them down. She learned employees' names, asked about their families, and understood their career aspirations beyond current job functions. Her office door remained open for genuine conversations, not just crisis management or performance reviews. The change wasn't performative. Victoria had discovered that authentic leadership required vulnerability, curiosity, and the humility to admit when others possessed knowledge she lacked. The respect she'd always demanded through position and authority now came naturally through earned trust and demonstrated character. Terrell's evolution was equally profound but more subtle. He'd found his voice in corporate settings without sacrificing the humility that made him effective. When he spoke in meetings, people listened, not because of his title, but because experience had taught them his insights were valuable. His expanded role allowed him to mentor other professionals transitioning from military to civilian careers. 3 mornings a week, he hosted informal breakfast sessions, where recent discharged service members could discuss challenges, share opportunities, and learn to navigate corporate environments that often undervalued their unique expertise. The mentorship program grew organically, creating networks of mutual support that extended throughout Houston's business community. Terrell never positioned himself as the expert. Instead, he facilitated connections and conversations that helped others recognize their own worth. Most importantly, he maintained unwavering focus on family. Professional recognition was pleasant, But Zara's happiness and development remained his primary measure of success. Every career decision still filtered through a simple question. Does this help me be the father she deserves? Zara Jackson, now 9 years old, had become Sterling Tech's unofficial inspiration. Her robotics projects grew increasingly sophisticated, always focused on helping others overcome challenges. Her latest creation, a communication device for nonverbal children, had attracted attention from pediatric therapy centers across Texas. Victoria's support for Zara's interests had evolved from guilt-motivated gestures into genuine mentorship. She funded the school's robotics team not as charity, but as investment in future innovators who approached problems with fresh perspectives. Zara visited Sterling Tech regularly, treating the facility like an extended laboratory where she could observe real-world applications of engineering principles. Employees looked forward to her visits, energized by her enthusiasm and creative approach to technical challenges. Her presence reminded everyone why their work mattered, not just for quarterly profits or shareholder returns, but for building a world where brilliant children could pursue their dreams regardless of economic circumstances or social expectations. Victoria often found herself considering decisions through Zara's lens, asking whether policies and practices created environments where curious, capable people could thrive regardless of their background or current position. The test of Sterling Tech's transformation came during another high-stakes crisis 8 months later. A new client presentation depended on backup generator systems, and familiar problems emerged just hours before crucial demonstrations. This time, Victoria's response was immediate and instinctive. "Get Terrell. We need his expertise." No hesitation, no consultation with engineering hierarchy, no concern about protocol. She'd learned to identify competence and trust it completely, regardless of organizational charts or traditional authority structures. The team that gathered in the generator housing represented the new Sterling Tech, Terrell leading technical assessment, Keisha Williams coordinating diagnostic systems, Preston Wells contributing theoretical knowledge, and Victoria facilitating resource allocation. Expertise flowed based on capability, not title. Working together as equals, they solved the problem in 30 minutes. The solution combined field experience, advanced diagnostics, and collaborative troubleshooting that no single person could have achieved alone. After the successful presentation, Victoria realized they'd unconsciously created the kind of workplace she'd always imagined, but never knew how to build. One where everyone's contributions mattered, where respect flowed based on character and competence, where leadership meant enabling others to excel. Later that evening, as they secured equipment and prepared to leave, Terrell approached Victoria with the slight smile that had become familiar over months of developing mutual respect. "You know," he said, "you never did give me that kiss." Victoria laughed, the memory of that mortifying challenge now transformed into something they could acknowledge without discomfort. "Would you have wanted it?" "Not the way you offered it," Terrell replied honestly. "That was about power and humiliation, not recognition or respect. But respect, that I'll take every day." "You have it," Victoria said, meaning every word. "You've always deserved it. I just needed to learn how to see it." Their relationship had evolved into something neither had expected, genuine friendship built on professional partnership and mutual appreciation. Victoria valued Terrell's wisdom and steady perspective. He respected her growth and commitment to change. They'd become proof that authentic transformation was possible when people chose courage over comfort, growth over ego, and connection over control. Sterling Tech's policies now required comprehensive skills assessment for all positions, ensuring that hidden expertise was identified and utilized effectively. The Terrell-Jackson Protocol became company shorthand for checking assumptions before drawing conclusions, especially during crisis situations. Zara Jackson started high school with a full company scholarship specifically designed for children of Sterling Tech employees, ensuring that financial circumstances never limited educational opportunities. Her robotics team, sponsored by the company's innovation fund, competed nationally while developing assistive technologies for disabled students. Victoria and Terrell's partnership extended beyond Sterling Tech. They spoke at conferences about inclusive leadership, served on boards addressing veteran employment issues, and mentored other organizations seeking cultural transformation. Their story became a case study in business schools, demonstrating how recognizing existing talent could generate both human and financial returns that exceeded traditional recruiting approaches. Most importantly, they'd proven that workplace relationships could transcend artificial hierarchies when built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine appreciation for human dignity. Terrell Jackson never needed Victoria Sterling's kiss or validation. He needed her respect, her recognition of his humanity, and the opportunity to demonstrate what he could accomplish when prejudice didn't cloud judgment. His expertise had always existed. His character had never wavered. His dedication to family and excellence remained constant throughout every challenge. The transformation wasn't in Terrell, it was in others learning to see what had always been there. The most powerful changes happen not when we prove ourselves to skeptics, but when skeptics finally recognize the worth that was present from the beginning. True leadership means creating environments where everyone's capabilities can flourish, where assumptions give way to appreciation, and where respect becomes the foundation for extraordinary achievement. Terrell Jackson fixed more than generators that day. He fixed assumptions, expectations, and limitations that had prevented an entire organization from reaching its potential. And in doing so, he showed that the greatest repairs happen not to machines, but to the prejudices that keep us from seeing each other clearly. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember their worth isn't determined by others' assumptions. Drop a heart if you believe everyone deserves to be seen for who they really are, because recognition changes everything, and respect costs nothing but transforms everything it touches.